A beacon of light for women seeking financial liberation, Meaghan is the dynamic founder of the Era of Women and Wealth, an all-female wealth-led initiative that stands at the intersection of empowerment and economic independence.
Financial literacy coach and powerhouse in the financial industry. Let's welcome Meaghan Keeven. Hi, Meaghan. What is financial literacy and what is this term meaning?
So financial literacy at the simplest form for me and my clients is understanding how to use money and how can it impact us on an everyday basis, because it's something that we use or is running in the background every day for us. So at the most basic form, it's just truly understanding how to use our money so that we can be more impactful and more directional with it.
Mm-hmm. And when it's come to the term money, how you differentiate that one with the women entrepreneurs and the male entrepreneurs?
Well, people always ask me that, like, how is it different for men and women? And it's really not. And, there are some people who want to heavily focus on the gender role of it. But when it comes down to it, there's really, money is neutral, and men and women both have to use it, right? Grown-ups use it, children use it. We use it at every stage of our life. And so I don't like to put the differentiator of a gender role. But I do think that there is a lack of education more on the female side of things, purely because of societal standards. It's not to anyone's fault. It's just how things have kind of evolved, excuse me. And so I do think that men typically talk about money more, so they're more comfortable and confident around it. And it's just not as talked about or brought up among women, and maybe not taught as much to women. There's not as much emphasis on it for women. So I think that's where the difference lies, but I don't think money necessarily does anything different for a male versus a female. We both use it in the same way.
Mm-hmm. And Meaghan, when we talking about the money and the entrepreneurship and the startups, actually, what's the term, the bank, the people, everyone use the credit cards and the payment for the banking system. And some people argue the banking system we don't need, and we can go through the crypto stuff in the future. And how do you viewing this AI right now happening in, and how it will impact on the finance in the future? And what's your thoughts on it?
I do think there's a place for it. So I would never, well, I shouldn't say never, but as of right now, I don't encourage individuals to put everything into cryptocurrency. I think, yes, should there be a portion once you are at a certain level in your financial strategy and plan, that you can start to contribute to that area? Absolutely. And I think if we're not paying attention to it and we are not aware of new and upcoming things, that's a detriment to us. Like, we at least need to have the awareness and the basic understanding. So I do think there's a place for it. And I think as time progresses, it will become more common and more well-known to people, more understood. But I do feel like right now they're still at the very basic level of money and finance for the average person. It's still a very misunderstood topic.
Mm-hmm. And Meaghan, I have to ask this question because the trend is going on, the ban of TikTok. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs, even the women entrepreneurs, their main avenue of marketing is TikTok right now. I know there are 170 million users in TikTok. So the bill is signed and they have the time for another 11 months. And how do you feel about it? And what will be the alternative for this? And will it impact highly on women entrepreneurs, or will it be like a dot-com bubble which happened in 1990s?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And who knows really like what will truly happen with the legislation, right? Like, things could change very quickly. Again, this is another opportunity for us to make sure as entrepreneurs that we are bulletproof in a sense, right? Like, we are not putting all of our quote unquote eggs in one basket. and that we diversify where are our income sources coming from. So someone that is solely dependent on TikTok, this is really kind of at least a wake up call, or hey, open up your eyes a little bit to how are you going to shift? How are you it? Otherwise your whole income stream is going to be gone. So I would like to think that people would have a plan B. And if they don't, then this is definitely the time, if they are solely dependent on TikTok, to have a plan B, maybe a plan C, and look at how they're going to pivot or adjust due to or based on what the legislation actually ends up as.
Mm-hmm. And Megan, when we move a little bit with the investment part, so the cryptocurrencies are there, and ETF and share market, and there are a lot of people invest themselves as an entrepreneurs. So actually, what avenues is suitable for the person who is newly coming into market, like as an entrepreneur, and where should hold the money? I mean, the monetary thing is more complex with the unique people. Why? Because they have to hold some money for their safety usages, and there should be some savings in the bank, and there should be some investment in portfolios, and they should invest themselves as an entrepreneurs to grow up their self studies, and some more courses or university studies, or how they improve themselves. So at this point, the money management is crucial. So what is the advice you can give to the people newly come into entrepreneurship?
I think if you are newly in the game of funding yourself, being your only source of income, like you have nobody else to depend on, I think there are very basic check boxes that we need to take care of before we move on to some of the more advanced strategies or some of the more advanced techniques in finance and growing your wealth, right? I want to know, as an entrepreneur, how long am I going to be able to last, or how big of a shock am I going to be able to absorb if I don't have a great 3 months, 6 months, a year, and so I think really have a little bit of a cushion. One thing that I always go back to with people is, have you protected yourself? And when I say that, I mean, do you have 3 to 6 months worth of an emergency fund? So what are your fixed expenses? And do you have those at least sitting in a savings account, a high yield savings account, so that if you are having a bad few months, you can absorb that shock and not be totally detrimental to you or your financial situation, or you're not putting it on high interest credit cards. That's just, then you're kind of on a treadmill of out of control of not being able to pay that down, and then you're even further behind. Do you have basic things like that in place as an entrepreneur? We all know that there's very much an up and down to being an entrepreneur. At least in the very beginning, it can be very tough to kind of really get that stability in place. And so I would say basic money 101, have an emergency fund so that you can kind of fall back on that as needed, and you're not putting yourself into a vicious cycle of high interest debt, not being able to get out of it, and then you're even further behind.
Okay. And Megan, I have to ask this question because it's trending more on social medias. The Gen Z, right? So these are the people, or the category, I can say, more into observing the things, but not much into implementing. I can say like 70-30. So when it's come to an entrepreneurship in current era with Gen Z, so how these people are managing the money is a question mark. But the previous generation is very fine. They are used to savings and the investment, and they are keeping the monetary values and the spending on a straight line. But current era with Gen Z is making some scrambles in a market, a Bitcoin, or buying a token, or going for more into share market with some new advanced things and AI, and much depend on the parents, or trying for some advanced things and just observing the things. So this kind of generation, how can we motivate towards a right track of savings and investment, even in the women entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's an important question too, right? Like, so you can learn all you want, but if we don't implement it or take action, then how are we actually creating change, creating wealth, growing wealth, or actually reaching our goals? And so I think that's a big thing, even with, my generation. Like, you have to implement a plan. I do think there's like the quote unquote sexiness of the cryptocurrency and some of these other like riskier investments. And that's fine, right? Like people are drawn to that, but also there's a lot of risk associated with that. And so again, I will always go back to the default of like, you have to protect yourself first. And if you have some basic things set up, you've got a good savings bucket, you've got income stability, you've got some basic investment accounts, then I think layer on those other more strategic or riskier strategies. But I will say, no matter what generation you're in, if you don't implement, you're going to get anywhere. And you and I both know in this space, time is your greatest asset. And so I would say to those younger individuals, implement. Even if you take, let's say that you had an extra $200 a month and you wanted to put on towards something very risky, still make sure you're putting something towards a more traditional or maybe a little bit less risk type of account so that you have time on your side. Because again, you and I both know time is the biggest asset. And so I think one interesting exercise to walk a very young individual through is showing them the compounding of time and what that can do to even a basic account with very little contributed on a consistent basis. And so I think, again, it's just going to be more awareness and more kind of a push with these younger individuals to say, hey, that's fine, you can learn about it, but you actually have to do it. And I don't think that just goes for, finances or money. I think that goes for all areas of life. Is you can't just sit. You have to take an action, even if it's imperfect, even if it's messy. Take the action and go from there. And they'll definitely see a difference, especially because they are so young.
True. And Megan, I have to ask this question because financially empowered woman, meaning what matrices or how can you measure she's strong with finance or strong with the spending habit or the savings? What matrices and how we can measure that she is strong with finance?
Yeah, I don't, there are specific metrics, right? We can have a concrete number associated with an account, but what is that person's definition of financial freedom or, at a level of independence that they want to accomplish? So it might be different for one woman saying, I'm financially empowered because I'm out of debt. And that's all that makes her financially empowered, is now she's gained that confidence because she knows she walked through her system. She got herself out of debt. And then we might have another woman who feels that she's financially empowered because now she has a $500,000 spread across her savings and her investment account. So I don't think there's one particular metric. I think it's taking it back to each individual's goal and applying it that way. And then we can say, yes, we hit that metric, or no, we still need to make a little progress, or maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what the new metric is. But I think the metrics are going to vary based on the individual.
Wow. Megan, mindset is different for each and everyone. It's very unique. So some people are always in a mindset of spending and the new trend. Let's say if some new dresses or a new kind of a vehicle or new luxury stuff, they have seen they are going for a purchasing because they have the purchasing capacity. It's fine. But when it's come to the investment part, they think after the spending, what is remaining, okay, from that we will go for a small portion of investment in somewhere. So do you think this is a healthy mindset or how it should be?
I don't, but that's my personal opinion. I try to walk my own clients through the exercise of, we got to pay ourselves first, and our investments have to be, our investment savings, however you want to phrase it, those need to be just as important as a fixed expense. And again, this goes back to the time horizon aspect of it, because if I can get a client to start investing even a small amount and just count that as a fixed expense when they're 25 years old, that is going to have a huge impact by the time they're even 35 years old, right? And so for me, I highly encourage each one of them to set a fixed amount and direct every dollar of their income or whatever money they have and make it very deliberate in how they spend it. I don't ever tell them like, hey, you can't go out to dinner, you can't buy a new car, you can't, have a home. But I encourage them to make sure while they're simultaneously, grabbing the materialistic things, that they are also doing the right things on the back end. And if you can figure out a balance of those, then I think that's the best possible outcome, right? And so sometimes it takes some work to get to that equilibrium. But it's definitely doable to get there. But I will always say you have to direct your money and have some portion of it, even if it's small when you're first starting out, to put into an account where it can compound and grow and make an impact and truly change your life 10 years, 15 years down the road.
Wow. And Meaghan, I have to ask regarding this scenario. Let me explain you. So there's a woman and she want to have the savings a lot. And her financial advisor told her, don't keep the money as a dollars, keep it as an asset like gold and silver. So she have invested all money in gold, and now the gold prices keep hiring. It's fine anyway. So do you think is it a right strategy to invest in gold and keep as a gold biscuits or gold pounds, or keeping it as a money or investing in shares or investing in entrepreneurship, or how you viewing the saving, how it should be like in a monetary way, or it should be as a solid metals, or it should be like a real estate, or how the money should produce money. It's really ubiquitous and it's important, but some people always keep the money as like that, and over a period the depreciation and the currency value keep decreasing. It's true. And how you viewing this point, how the people should hold the money, on which way they should keep the savings?
Yeah. So if someone's advisor is telling them that they should be heavily concentrated in something like a precious metal, gold, silver, I think maybe you should look again. I don't think that it's healthy to have every part of your investment strategy concentrated in one area. Now, I will say, are there outliers to that rule? Yes. But while I'm speaking today on this podcast, I'm speaking of the average general person who's not a multimillionaire, billionaire, right? The average person cannot afford to just be concentrated in something like a precious metal. And so I would say that individual might need to go back to their advisor and ask why. Like, why are you telling me to be, just solely concentrated in this? And really have them explain and really think, okay, does that align with what I'm thinking at a basic level, right? I don't expect the consumer or that client to be highly educated in money or finance, but when something sounds off, have enough wherewithal to question. Just like you would go to a doctor, and if a doctor said something to you that didn't make sense, like you would ask the question, right? So that you would understand.
True.
And so we have to apply that same principle to our money. Like we still have to ask questions, even though we might have hired an expert or a perceived expert. We still have to ask the questions if something sounds off or something is very extreme, because the average person, the average investor, shouldn't be concentrated in one particular area or sector or type of investment.
True. With that note, Meaghan, the money is very important for everyone, right? So the saving is very important for investment. So saving portion, as we mentioned before, before the spending, we should allocate a portion for the investment. So investment meaning a lot of people are thinking okay, share market or buying bonds or ETF or whatever kind of paper or AI things. So actually, what mean by the investment? What term is fine, or what do you think about this investment? How it generate the money over a time, and the timing is very important anyway. And I have seen a recent article, right? They have promoting their bond, like if someone is investing money like every day $10 for 35 years over a percentage of 7%, he will earn like 1.2 million in 35 years. So it's a kind of a compounding interest.
Mhm.
So this kind of advertisements are going on. The time is very high. So actually, what is the mean by the investment for women entrepreneurs you are saying?
Yeah, so I think people think investments have to be something crazy, and they don't. Actually, you're investing when you put into your savings account, correct? You're investing at an extremely low rate of return, 0.01, if even that, but you're still investing. And so I think people need to take it back and make things not so trendy or sexy, and just break it down to the basics and say, okay, I got comfortable putting my money into a savings account. Now I'm going to take a step further and maybe putting into a high yield savings account, which are doing very well right now, right? They don't always do very well. And so I think, again, you have to know and have a basic understanding of the economy and what's working well at a specific time. And then there's always going to be basic investment accounts that individuals, whether the economy is doing so great, can invest in. And then when certain economic changes or factors are occurring, you can adjust and maybe redirect certain portions, right? So right now, everybody's really high on high yield savings account. It's still technically an investment. We're sitting at 4 or 5%, where it wasn't that much, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And so, right, like that's a very easy redirect of money from a normal savings account sitting at a bank to a high yield savings account, right? We upped our game slightly. There wasn't much risk associated with it. But the reason why that's happening so frequently now is because they're doing better than what they were. And so there's an understanding of what the economy is doing and how that's affecting certain type of investment accounts that then we can say, okay, this changed. So now maybe my strategy needs to change or needs to be adjusted so that I am capitalizing on some of the economic changes and make a gain. But then there's going to be times where we also need to scale back in certain accounts. And so again, this is where it can be really helpful if you do have a financial expert in your corner, kind of just touching in on monthly, quarterly, biannual, annual basis and saying, hey, here's what's going on. Here's the risk associated with it. Here's how it's going to affect your account. Here's how it's going to affect your overall strategy. Do you want to adjust? Do you want to change, redirect, so on and so forth? But you got to be still aware of the basics and always be able to come back to those as needed.
And Megan, this is a question about the average investor and the average person, not a millionaire or someone else. So actually, there are people we can see trending of taking credit card, like 2 or 3 credit cards they are holding with on hand. And when it's come to the paying of debt, the percentage of the credit score and all, like 20% and 21% they are paying, apart from the money they got. So actually, the interest rates are very high. So a lot of people don't understand at the point when they're borrowing the money from a card, but when they're repaying the loan with the interest, they get to know, oh my God, I'm in a lock, right? So at this kind of moments are there for average ordinary people. So what is your advice for the people who having like 2 credit card or 3 credit card and using and trying to build up the credit score and finally end up in paying a high amount of interest and loan? And what's your thought on it? And what's your tips for these people?
Yeah, so credit is a very important part of our lives. It's basically like a report card for an adult, right? That's how we get the things that we need. And it can be very lucrative to have a good credit score, right? If you've got 750 plus, your interest rates are going to be way, way lower, allowing you to afford more than a person that had a 500 credit score, right? And so credit, there are many, many components to it. And I think our society today has made it very easily to get credit. But they've also simultaneously made it very easy to get yourself into debt with the extended credit. And so my advice to people would be, you have to, again, it's awareness. What cards do I have? What are my interest rates associated with it? Do I have an interest-free period? There are cards that have 0% for 12 months. Am I using that and leveraging that 0% interest to put myself ahead? Or am I just being irresponsible and I'm picking up another credit card because I want more things and I'm keeping up with the Joneses and I'm not really paying attention to my overall situation? And so when you have 2 cards that have high interest rates associated with them, you need to pick one, preferably with the highest interest rate, and you need to get rid of that thing, that balance, as quick as possible. And your credit score is determined by many things, right? Your credit utilization. So how much of the credit extended to you are you using at a given amount in time, in relation to what you actually have available? Are you making your payments on time? That is probably one of the biggest factors that affect your credit that I think people don't realize is just making your payments on time is probably making the biggest impact on your credit score. Lenders also look at other various things like what type of credit do you have? Do you have just a mortgage? Do you have a mix of mortgage, credit cards, student loans? They want to make sure that you have a good mix of it, a good repayment history, a good credit utilization percentage. So there's a lot that goes into credit that I think people aren't aware of and they don't know about. And again, there are experts who go in depth. I mean, they can look at your credit situation and say, change XYZ and you'll be here in 2 months. Change this and you'll be here in 6 months. And debt associated with credit cards is, I mean, it's astonishing in our society today. And so I think, again, I will always go back to, you have to know what you have, what you're spending, what are your interest rates, and how are you actually going to repay those? And this might sound like tough, but if you can't afford it, you shouldn't buy it. Again, there's specific strategy for leverage of credit, which is something more high level. But at the most basic level, if you can't afford it and you know at the end of the month you're not going to be able to pay it back, or in a couple of months you're not going to be able to pay it back with an associated interest rate, then you don't buy it.
Meaghan, I want to think and ask about a question regarding a vehicle loan. So there are people who always targeting a second-hand or used vehicle where the market price is below 70%. So I think that's a good strategy. But still, some youngsters are looking for extra luxury vehicles and end up in paying like a premium, and vehicle loans will be in a top level 20-30%. And when they're reselling, or in some point they have broken with the vehicle loan and the asset they have gained. So actually, what do you think about the valuation of the vehicles and the interest rate?
Again, this goes back to something we touched on, right? Like, this is something that has, I shouldn't say recently, but over the past year and a half, 2 years, like, has changed in the car financing space. It used to be that interest rates were still low associated with auto loans, and that used cars didn't have as much value, right? Now that's kind of flipped. There's a shortage, just different, again, economic factors that are playing in this space. Again, this is just something I think maybe being a little bit older, right? Like, see the value in how much you're saving by possibly buying a car that's a year or two older than brand new. If you have $2,000 a month to spend on bills and other like random expenses in your life, and 1,000 of that is dedicated to a car loan, we need to look at that, and we need to change it, honestly, because unless cars are just literally the most important thing to you in life, and that's really what you want to spend your money on, that's probably not the best use of your money. So again, I always tell people, spend with what aligns with your values. But for most people, they are not diehard car fans. And so we should probably take a second look and readjust. And maybe that means selling your car and getting a lower note per month, so that we then have money free to do other things with, such as investing, which then compounds and actually makes you money, versus you spending on a depreciating asset that you're likely not going to get money out of in the long run.
Wow. And Meaghan, what is your advice or tips for the ideas or the people who are watching this podcast?
For just money in general?
Yep. And the loan, especially because
yeah.
I have received a lot of questions regarding the car loan and credit cards. So actually, a lot of people are in trouble regarding this. And what is your advice for those people?
Okay, I'll give you specific on credit cards and car loans, and then we can go just to, like, in general, how you can overall improve. Credit cards, right? Again, literally do the exercise, list every one of the cards out. What's the interest rate associated with it? How much do you have that you actually, like, lenders are giving you? So is your limit 30 grand? Is your limit 15 grand? Look at that. Look at your balances and really get an overall picture of where you sit with things. Sometimes that in and of itself is a wake-up call for people, and they are like, oh crap, I didn't realize I've got 50 grand between these 3 cards. I'm just focused on this one that has 15 on it right now, and I totally forgot about these other 2 in the background. So sit down and do that basic exercise, and then pick one. I like to start with one of 2 ways. You can either pick the one with the highest associated interest rate and start there, right? And kind of knock that one out. Or you can start with one that has a very small balance associated with it, so that you can get kind of like that immediate win. And then that encourages you to continue down the payoff road. So that would be my advice on the credit cards. As far as auto loans, again, look at what proportion your car note is compared to your other expenses, and see if that really aligns with how much you really want to spend on a car. You can refinance a car loan. That is an option for people if you have a higher interest rate. But really, just go back and look, like, does this make sense in my overall financial picture to have something that is costing me this much money that is nothing but a depreciating asset? And see how much it means to you then. So that would be credit cards and auto loans. If I could give your audience, or just people in general, overall, like, what is one of the most powerful things that you could do in your financial, like, wealth accumulation growth? Look at what you have on a weekly basis. Something about this exercise makes you really understand where you're sitting currently. And then it allows you to picture where you want to go, and you know where you're at and what you have to do to get to that next step. And so the biggest trick is take 10 to 20 minutes a week. I don't know, say on a Sunday morning, get a coffee, sit down. It's not the funnest exercise, but I guarantee once you start building an awareness of where you're at right here and right now, your mind will do something, and it will start shifting, and you will start tweaking, redirecting, and you will be more likely to hit your goals or to pull back on certain things if you're looking at it more frequently than if you're just, hey, I look at this one time a year every January 1 because that's my New Year's resolution. Like, we don't get anywhere when we do that. So put it in front of your face more frequently, and you'll be more successful with it.